Hi guys, welcome to my channel, and how are y'all doing today? Here on Abby the Witch, we talk all things witchcraft. If that is something you can vibe with, you can go ahead and hit subscribe. You can also follow me on other platforms like Instagram and Patreon, Abby the Witch, just like it is here. So here today on Abby the Witch, we are going to be talking all about witch flight. Sorry, my dogs are barking. Yes, witch flight, aka spirit flight, also known as a few other things, and we will get into that. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about what is witch flight, a little bit of history, folklore, my personal interpretation, and my personal experience with witch flight as well. So what is witch flight? Witch flight is the process of your spirit leaving your body to visit the other world, the underworld, or even things here on the physical plane. Usually, especially nowadays, I intentionally take flight, but there has been times where I unintentionally did witch flight. And that was in the beginning when I didn't really even know about witch flight, but I would do things like meditate, or even in my dreams, I feel like I have taken flight before too. So many of you have probably heard, I'm sure a lot of you, most of you maybe even, have heard of the words astral travel or astral projection. This is pretty much the same thing as witch flight. I personally feel like there's a little bit of a difference. Different people are going to tell you different things. Their interpretation of these words might be something a little bit different than mine. All three are, again, yes, your spirit leaving your body to visit another place. However, I feel like, at least in my personal experience when talking to other witches or other people, during astral travel or projection, the places you visit are more cosmic or celestial, okay? It's also a bit of a more like new agey type of vocabulary. I feel like at least the traditional witches that I talk to refer to it as spirit or witch flight. Even though witch flight is also the process of your spirit leaving your body, it also pulls way more from folklore. As trad and folk witches, we pull a lot of inspiration for our personal practice from folklore, historical references of witches, and witch flight is no exception. For example, there is some folklore and historical theories that the witches of old, witches from a long time ago, would use things like toxic plants, hallucinogenics, to essentially trip balls and have a spiritual experience that was witch flight. There's also lore that witches would use the end of their broomsticks to, masturbate. So editing Abby here, I also wanted to mention and just make it very clear that when I say the term masturbate, it wasn't necessarily that they're masturbating. I just said that this is so awkward. I didn't mean to say it like, all I meant was they were inserting it into their body, that according to the folklore, okay? Whether that was sexual to them, like it was a form of like sex magic in order to take flight, or whether it just be like inserting hallucinogenics into their body that way, I don't know. I just remember reading that there was folklore that they would insert the end of their broomstick into their body that way. So I just want to make that clear. Again, this is just folklore. Believe it or don't believe it. Just wanted to make it clear. This is kind of controversial, I've noticed. A lot of people almost get like offended by this lore. I can understand why, kind of, but I also like kind of love it. Not that I've tried it, but I kind of love it. I could see why this might be a little controversial and like kind of annoying that this folklore is around, honestly, or even like offensive, because I could totally see men at this time making up this myth about witches, not only to make them seem like blasphemous and evil and disgusting, right? But also because they were getting off to it. You know what I mean? Like, I could also see men at that time like fetishizing witches and having this like very taboo fantasy about witches, and almost saying this to like, yeah, they masturbate with their broomsticks, like almost like trying to like almost wishing it true. You know what I mean? There's even modern shows and movies that pull from this folklore as well. There's a scene from the movie The Witch where, if you haven't seen that movie yet, it's streaming somewhere. I'm obsessed with that movie. I know a lot of trad witches are. I know a lot of other witches are. There is a scene in the movie The Witch that is my favorite scene, and I'll briefly describe it to you. The witch steals a baby. Trigger warning, very violent. I'll give you a second to pause if you don't want to hear it. But she kills the baby, which I do not like that part. But it's a horror movie, like they have to make it scary, right? She kills the baby, she uses the baby's blood, she puts the blood in the mortar and pestle, right? She covers her body in the baby blood. She covers her broomstick, her besom, in the baby's blood. And then I think, it's kind of up to personal interpretation, right? But I think she's masturbating with a broomstick to like manifest her spell. She could be taking hallucinogenics. She could have consumed some toxic plant, and maybe that's why. If you've seen the scene, you know what I mean. Like, she's kind of like tripping out. She looks like she's doing something. I think she's masturbating with a broomstick. I think they're pulling from that folklore. And then she rises up in front of the full moon and she like turns into this young, beautiful maiden. That scene is iconic. There's also a scene from Salem, the TV show series Salem, that pulls from that folklore as well. Tituba, she needs to be talked about more, but anyway, there's two witches, Mary and her it's supposed to be her servant, but like in actuality they like are partners, and they like are witches who work together. But anyway, she unscrews the top of the besom and she slides it into Mary, and Mary takes flight and visits the witch's sabbath. So there's also folklore about witches making flying ointment or flying oil blends, with the base being baby fat. And they would actually dig up graves. The lore says they would dig up graves of babies and take the baby fat. I think that's also that scene from the movie The Witch when she kills the baby. I think it's pulling from that also. Historians have said, I've read anyway, that they probably actually were using something like boar's fat. But again, Christians at the time, Puritans at the time, had to make them look as evil as possible. So yeah, that's probably why it turned into that. So all this being said, like I had briefly mentioned earlier, modern trad and folk witches pull inspiration from folklores like this to perform things like witch flight today. For example, I made a flying ointment with some traditional ingredients. I obviously didn't use baby's fat, but I am still currently lactating. I'm nursing my son, so I used breast milk. That's something that makes baby's fat, so I pulled inspiration from that folklore, and I improvised, and I used breast milk. I also used mugwort, is a traditional ingredient, and I also used parsley, which I used parsley because it was said that they actually used hemlock, but sometimes they would get confused and pick parsley instead because they look very similar. So I just went with that. I didn't want to use any super toxic plants. So I, again, improvised and I used parsley. If you want to see how I made that concoction and all the ingredients that I used. It's on my Patreon if you're interested. Okay, now that I've talked briefly about what witch flight is, just a little bit about history and folklore, I'm gonna talk more about my personal experience and how I personally take flight. So first things first, and the most important thing I feel like when trying to take flight is candle gazing, AKA Tritaka. I have talked about candle gazing for years now on my channel. I have talked about candle gazing since the beginning. Honestly, I've never met a witch who didn't use candle magic. I've never met a witch who never has done candle gazing. It's the most handy, in my opinion, one of the most handy forms of magic. I'm sure you have a candle laying around your house. Candle gazing is literally what it sounds like. You just gaze into the flame until you're in a trance-like state, and then you close your eyes. Tritaka is, I try to nod at its like culture that it stems from, and it's Indian, I believe. But anyway, it's literally just the art of gazing into a candle flame. You traditionally do it in a dark room if you really want to have good, especially if you've never done this before. I would start out with doing it in a dark room. It's a little easier to do it in a dark room. I also might use my flying ointment to take flight. I might rub it on my forehead, my third eye, my palms of my hands. I've even rubbed it on the bottom of my feet before. I don't usually do that. I usually just do my third eye, my palms and my hands so that I can like go like this around the candle as I'm gazing into it. I haven't done this in a long time. I used to have I still have it, I just haven't used it in a while, but I used to use the offering oils. I have offering oils for the devil and Lilith and my infernal kin. So when I take flight and go visit them, if I need to go visit them, I can bring that oil with me to offer to them. So that's a good idea too. If you ever want to like visit a certain deity or spirit and you want to give them an offering, hold it with you, have it with you in some way before you start gazing. So that when you take flight in spirit, you'll have it with you, you know? Like I said earlier, I used to kind of unintentionally take flight. Not always, sometimes it would just be like a deep meditation. But I really feel like there were a few times where I unintentionally took flight. And I just didn't know what exactly it was at the time. Now though, I definitely mentally set the intention before I do anything. I'll cleanse myself and then I will set the intention in my brain. Okay, I'm going to take witch flight. And then I'll do the oils and the gazing and I'll take flight. Once I'm done and I feel like my spirit has returned to my body, I open my eyes and if I have any oil on me, I go rinse off immediately. If I'm still feeling flighty or I didn't have any oil on me and I'm feeling flighty, you can do things like go out. I go outside. I try to ground myself. You can go outside, take a walk, feel the air, feel the sun, feel the ground under your feet. That's how I like to kind of like ground myself. Okay, so that's pretty much how I do it, you guys. I sometimes take flights just to see where it takes me. I sometimes take flight with the intention of going somewhere specific. I have a specific candle for visiting the underworld. Sometimes I have a specific deity or guide or demon that I want to go visit. And I always have that intention. I might say their name over and over and over again while I'm candle gazing, just to kind of like call myself to them, if that makes sense. Yeah, but it's really just about your intention, you guys. If you have set that intention of a specific place or a specific spirit or deity that you want to go talk to, as long as they're open to it, right? It should work. You should be able to visit them during your flight, okay? But again, saying that name, their name over and over again while you're gazing, in my experience, that helps, and I end up visiting them during my flight. Okay, now I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of books. One book that I've read, I don't know where it's at right now. It might be upstairs. Yeah, But I had to mention Ambrosia's Book of Flight, Ambrosia's Book of Witch Flight. It is a wonderful read. It is written by my very good friend and high priestess, Jasmine Ambrosia. She's here on YouTube. If you don't follow her, if you've not subscribed to her channel yet, please go do so. Jasmine Ambrosia. Very experienced witch, high priestess, traditional witch just like myself. And she's much more experienced in taking flight than I even am. So I would suggest getting your hands on that book. I will try to make a picture, put a picture somewhere on here so you can see what it looks like. You can buy her book on Amazon. She has another book out too, Ambrosia's Book of Spirits, and she has a third one coming out eventually. But anyway, if you're interested in witch flight or spirit flight, I would definitely get your hands on Ambrosia's Book of Witch Flight. Very good read. Now, the next book I'm going to mention, I haven't read yet, but I really want to read it. And every witch who does take flight, every traditional witch who I've talked to, has suggested that I read this book. And that is, I have to read it off of my notebook because it's a very long title. A Broom at Midnight, 13 Gates of Witchcraft by Spirit Flight by Roger J. Horn, okay? I want to get my hands on this book so bad. I've heard nothing but good things. If you've already read it, let me know what you think down below. Excuse me. If you plan on getting this book and you're planning on reading it soon, let me know what you think after. I need to get my hands on this book. I'm reading like 4 books at once right now. It's ridiculous. I need to get out of this habit of I just need to read one book at a time. Roger J. Horn, he's a more modern author. And he has written things like The Witch's Devil. That was in 2022, I believe. If you want to learn more about, I suggest this book all the time on my channel. If you want to learn more about the devil that I worship and work with, read that book, The Witch's Devil by Roger J. Horn. But I also really want to get my hands on his Spirit Flight book. So he's a phenomenal writer. All right, guys, well, that is all I have for today. My camera is overheating. If you have any more questions or want to know anything else or want to add anything about your experience, maybe please add that down below. And until next time, I hope you stay very well. And don't forget to follow the snake. Bye.